Eggplants. Women's suffrage. The Queen of England. Prince. All of these things have one crucial element in common, and it's not just that they're all delicious snacks. All of these have to do with the color purple, and that's no coincidence. Okay, sue me, maybe it is with eggplants, but I digress. Purple has long been lauded as a color of luxury, sexuality, status, and wealth. But here's the thing, purple wasn't really a thing in the lives of us commoners until less than 200 years ago. Before that, the existence of purple was pretty much due entirely to the snail genocide of the uber-rich and powerful. Today, we will delve into how one teenager created a color that changed the course of history, influencing everything from fashion to chemistry to military power to gender equality in an explosion of purple. And he did it all by accident. A happy little accident. On spring break, actually. That's right, today we are talking about the invention of mauve, the world's first artificial purple. Or was it? And at the end of the video, we'll be swatching some extremely old, authentic mauve paint that was produced shortly after mauve was introduced in 1856. Let's get into it, shall we? So, I mentioned that purple first really became available to the public less than 200 years ago, but that doesn't mean that purple didn't exist before that time. Obviously, purple is everywhere in nature, and the human use of the color purple has been shown to date back to the uses of manganese and hematite in Neolithic art, tens of thousands of years ago. But here's the thing, purple is notoriously, ridiculously difficult to create. Plants and minerals that you would think would create vibrant dyes and paints are actually usually pretty awful at producing vibrant, light-fast colors. So for most of human history, although we've had thousands of gorgeous pigments stretching across almost all the colors of the rainbow, purple was noticeably absent. But with that being said, there are a couple of exceptions to that rule. The first, and by far the most common, was known as Phoenician purple, or Tyrian purple. It was invented around 1600 BCE, over 3,600 years ago, and it was created with these guys. Murex sea snails, a predatory sea snail that lives off the coasts of the Mediterranean Sea and Atlantic Ocean. What exactly predatory sea snails prey on? I wish I could tell you, but they're predatory, I guess. Cow sea snails. See, people would take these snails and carefully extract a tiny little dye gland from inside their squishy snail bodies. They would then take these dye glands and pulverize them into snail goo, then leave them out in the hot Mediterranean sun for the color to develop over a period of several weeks. If you're thinking, man, that sure sounds kind of sad and also like a huge stanky pain, just wait. Because here's the thing with Tyrian purple. Let's say that it's your brother's birthday in ancient Phoenicia. He's a big, important, highfalutin kind of government guy, so he's one of the only people allowed to even wear this Tyrian purple. You want to get him a simple, heartfelt gift, a tasteful purple toga to replace one of his older business casual togas. You go to the dye makers and you whip out your ancient Phoenician credit card, only to discover that to get that glorified bedsheet, it's not only going to cost you over $4,000, it's also going to take the lives of around 250,000 snails. That's like if you took a third of the population of snail Las Snailgus, if you will, and squished them into goo. Yikes! Suffice it to say that after a couple thousand years, the tragic snail sludge that was Tyrian purple eventually went out of style. In large part because it was just too expensive and took way too much effort to make. Actually, you can still get authentic Tyrian purple today. And for enough to make that purple toga today, it would only cost you between $250,000 to $3.5 million. Now, the other exception to this rule is Han purple, a pigment made of manganese and barium that was invented in China over 2,000 years ago. This pigment was super vibrant and light-fast, but unfortunately it faded into obscurity after only about 300 years, pretty much entirely absent from the historical record after 771 BCE. Why? Well, for one, it was an extremely complex process to make it, and two, much like Tyrian purple, this extremely complex process to make Han purple was never written down. In all fairness, paper wasn't invented yet, so I think we can give them a pass on this one. Although the method to make Han purple would eventually be rediscovered, it wouldn't be until 1992, almost 3,000 years after it disappeared from the historical record. Basically, in summary, the few ancient purple pigments that existed that were actually good and recognizable as purple were ridiculously hard to make, ridiculously expensive to make, and weren't written down at all. So it's no wonder that by the end of the Middle Ages, purple was essentially non-existent anywhere but in nature. Now, at this point in time, you may be saying to yourself, why didn't they just mix red and blue pigments together to get purple? They did. They just sucked. Why? Because in order to mix a super punchy purple, you need magenta, not red. And a pure magenta pigment hadn't really been discovered yet either. As a side note, magenta is not red and blue mixed together. It's a pure color that can't be properly mixed. Come at me, I have God and every printer in the universe on my side. Try me. And so, for a pretty long time, people didn't really think all that much about purple. And that's because, with the exception of the uber-rich, who still sometimes purchased garments made with snail goop, purple was functionally extinct. As far as the middle class was concerned, purple might as well have never existed at all, outside of the occasional flower or beautiful night sky. The coal tar wizard! An accidental epiphany. Fast forward a few hundred years, and the year is 1856. Isaac Singer had just invented the first sewing machine a few years back, racial tensions were mounting in the US, and, most importantly to our narrative, much of Europe was embroiled in the Crimean War. As British soldiers arrived in Crimea, many of them fell victim to malaria, and deaths by disease began to outnumber deaths from actual combat. Europe was desperate for a cure. At this point, the only cure known for malaria was an alkaloid substance known as quinine, which could only be extracted from the bark of specific trees called cinchona trees. The problem was that these trees only grew in South America, and, as my geography buffs might know, that's thousands of miles away from the Crimean battlefield. European soldiers needed something way better, and they needed it yesterday. Enter William Henry Perkin, an 18-year-old student at the Royal College of Chemistry. It was the middle of spring, and Perkin had just gone on break for the Easter holiday. However, much like other losers who choose to study educational materials in their spare time, he just couldn't seem to shake the need to try and figure out a solution to this malaria problem. See, chemistry at this point was an extremely new field. New to the point that William's architect father was disappointed in him for not making something of his life and also becoming an architect. Guy who makes stuff.
Not a
nerd.
Hey.
Did you ever think maybe I could be both?
William Henry Perkins had chemicals in his soul. 5 years ago, when he was 13, a friend had shown him a simple chemical experiment said to involve crystals. Not really sure what that means or what that's about. If anyone knows, let me know in the comments. From that point on, he was infatuated with this new scientific field that seemed like pure alchemy. The ability to take a substance of little value and extract something worth more than gold. Much more. And that is exactly what William was trying to do. There had been a lot of experimentation that had led leading chemists to try and figure out how to extract quinine, the same alkaloid found in cinchona trees, from coal tar, a gooey black byproduct left over from the use of coal. Being that coal was the main source of energy and power in Victorian Europe, there was a lot of this stuff just kind of laying around waiting to be experimented on. So back to spring break. Our guy Will has a small home laboratory that his dad had reluctantly helped pay for. Like when you have a well-meaning relative who's kind of confused about how getting an art degree could possibly give you any kind of future in this economy. But they give you a Target gift card anyway and hope for the best. During this break, William spent days in his lab trying to figure out how to do the chemical equivalent of spinning straw into gold. It was a miserable failure. Every single time. Finally, he just kind of gave up. So he began cleaning up all of the black goo that had been the sole reward of all of his efforts, and was shocked when, in wiping out a beaker, he discovered a brilliant purple residue. William Henry Perkins had utterly and miserably failed in making quinine. There's no arguing that. But in doing so, he had accidentally made the discovery of a lifetime, what would later be known as Perkins Mauve. Now, we believe in happy little accidents on this channel, but this accident was a little bit more like the scientific equivalent of getting off the wrong stop on the subway and finding a rat that was dragging around $1 million in cash. It didn't take long for Perkin to realize that he had stumbled upon something incredibly valuable. The $1 million cash rat, if you will. The pigment looked a lot like a mallow flower, called mauve in French, and was made out of aniline. So naturally, Perkin, with the incredible naming conventions he seems to share with many scientists, came up with the genius name Mauvine. I mean, hey, if it works, it works. Fast forward a couple of months, and Perkin had already filed a patent, and soon after, he opened a factory where he could make literal tons of purple dye. In less than 5 years, at the age of 23, Perkin was a millionaire. And Mauvine, or Mauve, had exploded across Europe. By now, there were already 28 dye factories dedicated to Perkin's creation, and more were quickly spreading throughout Europe, with England, France, and Germany all competing to put a stranglehold on the production of the wildly popular new color. With prominent figures like the Queen of England and the Empress of France donning mauve dresses, it was as if a purple plague had erupted. Actually, so much so that the higher-ups in society began referring to the middle class's obsession with this new purple as the mauve measles. But mauve didn't just become a big deal in fashion. This accidental purple ended up being used in everything from art to warfare, remaining an extremely important discovery for centuries to come. From the very beginning, mauve and other aniline dyes made the extravagant colors that used to be only available to the rich accessible to almost everyone, which in turn helped to decrease visual differences between those in high society and working class. In addition, new dye factories meant new jobs available, bolstering the economy and helping many people make better wages. But wait, there's more. Purple also quickly gained popularity in the art scene, where it made huge contributions to the works of artists like Edouard Manet, considered by many to be the creator of the first piece of modern art. Yeah, we went there. We went to modern art! In short, purple had begun its pattern of being a color that inspired social change. The symbolism of purple, that of dignity, loyalty, purpose, and valor, hadn't changed, but its audience had. Purple was used often by those in the lower classes as a symbol of progress, and they shifted its previous symbolic meaning of honor in social status to that of honor in social change. In the early 1900s, purple renewed this reputation as it was one of the main colors to celebrate American women's fight for the right to vote. Emmeline Pethick Lawrence, editor of the weekly newspaper Votes for Women, wrote, "Purple, as everyone knows, is the royal color. It stands for the royal blood that flows in the veins of every suffragette, the instinct of freedom and dignity." Despite being a color still strongly associated with literal monarchs, purple was also now a symbol of self-made monarchs, those willing to fight for their own seat at the table. Purple continued to be used as a symbol of social movements throughout the 20th century, being used in everything from the LGBTQ+ community to victims of domestic violence. If you look around, you'll still see vivid shades of lavender, mauve, and violet surrounding social causes everywhere. All of these points don't even begin to scratch the surface of how much the invention of mauve changed the world forever. For instance, it was only because of William Henry Perkin's artificial dyes that Walther Fleming was able to color cells and study chromosomes under a microscope, where he discovered mitosis and pioneered the field of cytogenetics. Mauve also helped Robert Koch, Nobel Prize in Medicine in 1905, to discover the bacteria that was responsible for tuberculosis after dying the germs from a sick patient. Actually, he dyed the sputum, which is pretty much exactly what it sounds like, and I apologize for, making you listen to that word. Sputum. What's more, the development of Perkin's synthetic dyes was crucial for the studies of Paul Ehrlich, Nobel Prize in Medicine in 1908, and a pioneer in chemotherapy research. One of the reasons we have chemotherapy? Purple. How we cured tuberculosis? Purple. How cells divide and reproduce? Is purple. Frankly, there's just too many areas to even begin to describe the impact that artificial purple has had on society. So it's important to remember that all of it was made possible by one kid's response to what was, by all accounts, a miserable failure. Perkin never figured out how to synthesize quinine. Sometimes that's just how things are. But I hope that the next time you find yourself looking at the color purple, maybe you'll be reminded about how sometimes what you first perceive as a failure could just be another open door to unexpected progress. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that this video tickled you purple. And thank you so much to the outpouring of patrons that I've gotten this past week. I really can't do any of this without you guys, and you make it so that I can afford more than just canned tuna in my life. If you would like to support me and join my Patreon, there's a link in the description, as well as this little link right here. In the meantime, if you liked this video, please subscribe and comment so that the algorithm understands that you do. Thank you so much for watching and brushing up on art history with me, and I will see you next time.